The sun had barely risen over the quiet plains of Texas when Mariam felt the first sharp pains of labor. Her hands, cracked from work and weather, gripped the edge of the dusty wooden cot in the back room of a trading post she had never seen. Until the day before, her breath came in short, ragged bursts as a groan escaped her lips. She was alone, no midwife, no kin, just an old quilt, the groaning boards beneath her, and the weight of new life pressing forward. Mariam wasn't supposed to be here. She had grown up in the green hills of Kentucky, daughter of a blacksmith, sister to 4 rowdy boys. Life had been hard, but never cruel. Not until the war took her father. Then the drought took the farm. And then came the man who promised her hope in the West instead. He took her trust and sold her along the way. She had been pregnant by the time they crossed into Texas, and by the time she realized what he had planned, she was already standing on a trader's porch, her name shouted out as if she were livestock. She's strong, knows how to cook and clean, good with animals. You won't find better in these parts, the trader hollered, and just about to have a baby too. The baby came fast. Between pain and prayer, Mariam barely knew when it was over. But when she heard the soft wet cry of her child, she gathered the infant to her chest and wept. The baby was small but strong, wrapped quickly in the hem of her dress torn loose. A girl. Dark hair, warm skin, eyes closed in sleep. Peaceful. They didn't give her long. Maybe half an hour. Just enough time to hold the baby, whisper prayers into her ears, kiss her cheeks, and promise her foolishly. Maybe that she would find her again one day. That was when he walked in. The cowboy. His boots were scuffed and his coat long and worn. A wide hat shadowed most of his face, but his voice was calm, like the slow flow of river water. I'll take her, he said. Mariam thought he meant the baby, but he pointed to her. The trader nodded and counted out a stack of bills. The amount wasn't large, but more than most would pay for a woman not yet standing. Mariam wanted to fight. She wanted to scream, but she was weak. And she had learned something in the last few months. Survival sometimes meant silence. She was pulled to her feet gently, more gently than she expected, and helped onto the back of the cowboy's horse. She didn't even ask what would happen to the baby. She assumed the worst. She assumed the baby would be sold next or handed off to a wet nurse, or worse, left. But just before they rode away, the cowboy turned to the trader and said, "Bring me the child." Mariam's heart stopped. Was he taking the baby too? The trader grunted and handed over the bundled infant. Mariam reached out instinctively, but the cowboy didn't pass the baby to her. Instead, he looked down at the sleeping girl. For a long moment. "What's her name?" he asked. Mariam blinked. She hadn't had time to give her one. I don't know, she whispered. The cowboy nodded, as if understanding more than she had said. Then he turned to the open sky and spoke, like he was speaking to someone far above or far away. "Then I'll give her one." He looked at the child, again, and said softly, "Layla. Her name is Layla." Mariam stared. There was something sacred in the way he said it. Like the name mattered more than he let on. Like he wasn't just naming a child, but offering her something real. Identity, dignity, a beginning. He handed the baby back to the trader. Carefully. "I don't want her," he said, surprising them both. "But make sure she finds a home. A good one. I'll pay more if I have to." Then he turned his horse and rode away. Mariam, behind him, too stunned to cry. The trail stretched for miles, empty and dry under the late summer sun. Dust rose beneath the hooves of the cowboy's horse, curling in the air like smoke. Mariam sat behind him, her hands clenched around the saddle horn, her thoughts far behind back. In the room where her child, her Layla, had been left, the cowboy hadn't said a word since they left. His silence wasn't cruel. It felt intentional, as if he knew she needed quiet more than comfort. Still, every step of the horse jarred Mariam's aching body, and deeper still, her soul. She finally spoke when they reached a narrow creek near a clump of cottonwoods. "Why did you do it?" He pulled the horse to a stop and dismounted. Then he turned to help her down. She didn't take his hand, but he steadied her anyway. She almost collapsed from the pain in her legs, and the fire in her back. Her body had barely recovered from childbirth. "Do what?" he asked. "By me," she said. "Name her. Then leave her." He led the horse to the water and let it drink. Only when he returned and sat on a fallen log did he answer. "You needed saving," he said plainly. Maryam flinched. "I don't need saving." He didn't argue. She watched him remove his hat and dip it in the creek. He handed it to her, filled with cold water. She drank slowly, the coolness shocking her parched throat. "I couldn't take the baby," he said after a moment. "Not the way I live. I move too much. Dirt roads, empty cabins. No milk. No way to care for her proper. But I could've stayed with her," Mariam whispered. The cowboy nodded. "I know. But you wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks with them. That traitor he was fixing to sell you again, this time further south, and 2 worse men. I figured if I paid enough, I could keep you out of that." Mariam sat beside the creek and let the water run through her fingers. It shimmered like the memories of her baby's soft skin. "And naming her?" she asked softly. The cowboy stared into the distance. "I had a sister, long time ago. Mama died giving birth. Pa blamed the girl. Didn't name her. Said she didn't deserve one." Mariam looked at him, surprised. "I called her Layla," he said. "Even when no one else would. Just for a while, till she died sick." Silence hung between them. "She deserved a name," he finished. They sat for a long time after that. Mariam didn't cry, though she wanted to. Something about the cowboy's story quieted her grief, not erased it, but gave it shape. When they began riding again, the sun was falling toward the west, painting the sky in pinks and gold. Mariam asked the question that had been weighing on her since they left the post. "What now?" "You'll stay at a place, I know," he said. "Couple runs a small farm outside Sweetwater. Decent people. She's had 6 kids of her own. You'll rest, heal, decide what comes next." Mariam stared at the horizon. "And you?" "I move on," he said. "Always do." She turned to him. "Why help me?" He shrugged. "I've done a lot of wrong in my time. Maybe I'm just trying to balance the scales." Mariam didn't answer. She didn't believe in perfect men anymore. But she believed in moments of mercy, and this, whatever it was, felt like one. That night they stopped at a small barn near an abandoned well. The cowboy started a fire and gave her a blanket. He slept outside the barn door, keeping his distance, saying nothing more than needed. Lay awake, staring at the stars. Her body ached, her heart even more so. But one thing kept circling in her mind like a lullaby. Layla. Her daughter had a name. A real name, spoken aloud, given not in shame, but in quiet honor. Mariam whispered it into the dark like a prayer. Layla. The small farm sat at the edge of a dusty road, nestled between rolling hills and wild mesquite trees. It wasn't much, just a wooden house, a corral, a chicken coop, and a few outbuildings, but it breathed of peace. The porch sagged a little, and the fence needed mending. But the flowers growing wild along the gate spoke of a woman's care. Mariam's eyes scanned the yard as the horse trotted closer. A boy, maybe 10, chased a goat around a patch of scrubgrass, laughing. A girl leaned out the window, her hands covered in flour. A wiry man in suspenders was fixing a wheelbarrow near the barn. He looked up as the cowboy rode in. "Evenin', Caleb," the man said. So the cowboy had a name. Caleb. Mariam didn't say a word as she slid off the horse with his help. The man eyed her briefly, not rudely, but like someone taking quiet stock of a person's condition. "Trouble?" the man asked Caleb. "No," Caleb said. "Just need a place for her to rest. She's been through it." The man nodded. "I'll get Miriam." Miriam turned out to be a tall woman with silver threads in her braid and eyes that could see deeper than most people's words. She took one look at Mariam and opened her arms. "You poor thing," she said, her voice soft and strong. Mariam stiffened at first. She hadn't been touched with kindness in so long, but then she let herself lean into the embrace. For a moment, it felt like home. They brought her inside, gave her clean clothes, a soft bed, and a warm meal. Miriam worked in quiet efficiency, never asking questions that cut too deep. When night came, Mariam sat on the porch alone, wrapped in a shawl. She looked out at the quiet land, lit silver under a full moon. Footsteps creaked behind her. Caleb, he handed her a tin cup of warm milk and sat on the steps. "Not too close. They'll take good care of you here," he said. Mariam nodded. "And then what?" He took a moment before answering. "That's up to you." Mariam looked at him, searching for signs of the man behind the silence. "You really just want to help. No expectations." He looked almost amused. "I've lived enough to know I can't buy forgiveness, but I can offer decency. If you want to call that helping, then sure." Mariam thought about her baby. Layla, a name spoken only once, but heavy with meaning. "Will I ever see her again?" she asked. "I don't know," Caleb admitted, "but I made sure she went to a family I trust. Good people. Maybe someday, when things are right." She sipped the milk. It tasted of honey and something else, maybe peace. How long will you stay? She asked. He stood. I ride out in the morning. Work to do. Mariam nodded, swallowing the strange feeling rising in her chest. It wasn't fear. It was something, like sorrow, but different. Grief with a flicker of gratitude. Before he turned to leave, she said, "Thank you." He paused, then tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself, Mariam." That was the first time he had said her name. When he was gone, she sat alone with the crickets and the wind, trying to make sense of everything. She felt hollowed out, but not broken. The pain was still there, sharp and aching, but something had shifted. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she thought about the future. She could stay here, learn to work the land, help with the children. He'll grow strong again, and maybe one day, when the time was right, she'd find Layla, not to take her away, but to let her know, your mother loved you, enough to let you go, enough to come back when she could stand again. Mariam closed her eyes and let the night hold her. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, and she whispered again the name that had changed everything. The days on the farm passed slowly but steadily, marked by the rhythm of chickens clucking, children laughing, and the soft thud of hoe on soil. For Mariam, life was not easy, but it was honest. Her hands were sore again, not from chains or cruelty, but from labor that bore fruit, kneading bread, gathering eggs, planting rows of squash and beans with Miriam. Miriam never pried, but she listened well. She spoke in gentle wisdom, the kind that came not from books but from bearing 6 children, burying one, and surviving a war that took more than just soldiers. "You'll find," she said one evening, as they shelled peas by lantern light, "the earth doesn't ask where you came from. It just wants to know if you'll stay long enough to grow something." Mariam didn't reply, but the words settled inside her. As the weeks turned into months, her body mended, and so did parts of her heart. She helped teach the youngest child his letters. She mended clothes. She began humming again tunes from childhood that rose to her lips like long-lost friends. She still thought of Layla every day, but the memory was no longer a raw wound. It was a seed planted deep within, waiting. Then, one warm morning, Miriam came in from the porch with a letter in her hand. She handed it to Mariam without a word. The handwriting was rough, the paper dusty. Miriam unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Miss Mariam, hope this letter finds you strong and safe. Heard from a writer that you stayed with the Turners. Good folk. I thought you might like to know. Layla is well. She's with a ranch family near Abilene. Husband and wife, no children of their own. They named her Layla too. I made sure of that. They're good to her. From what I hear, she's growing, strong, laughs easy. She no love. I didn't think I'd write, but something told me you should know. You did right by her. If you ever feel ready to ride out, there's work for you near Abilene. I know a place." Caleb. Mariam stared at the letter for a long time. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something else. Hope. That evening, she told Miriam everything. The story of how she came west, the man who betrayed her, the baby girl, the cowboy. All of it. Miriam listened without flinching. Then, she poured them both tea and said, "You don't need to decide today, but you will, and when you do, we'll help you." That night, Mariam dreamed of Layla, not as an infant, but as a girl running through a field of wildflowers, her dark hair flying, a smile wide as the sky. The next morning, Mariam walked out to the chicken coop and watched the sunrise over the field. She thought of the name Caleb had given her daughter. The name she had whispered so many nights. The name that had tethered her to hope. Maybe she wasn't ready yet. Maybe she needed one more season to gather her strength, to save some money, to prepare her heart. But now she had direction. She had a place. She had a name. And she had a choice. Autumn came like a whisper, brushing golden light across the Texas fields. The Turner's farm was preparing for harvest corn, tall and dry pumpkins, fat and round under sprawling vines. Mariam stood in the garden one morning, her basket full of tomatoes. When she realized her hands were no longer shaking, it had been nearly 5 months since she had ridden into this quiet life. 5 months since she had held Layla. She still carried the pain, but she no longer bowed under it. The grief had become part of her strength, not its undoing. And now, the letter from Caleb burned like a quiet promise in her apron pocket. She had read it at least 50 times, folded and unfolded it until the creases were worn thin. Every word was like a thread stitching her heart together. That night, she spoke to Miriam and her husband under the soft light of a kerosene lamp. "I'm ready," she said. Miriam nodded without surprise. "I knew you'd say that before the leaves turned." "We'll help with supplies," her husband said. We've got kin near Abilene if you need a place to stay. Mariam blinked back tears. You've done more than I could have asked. Thank you for giving me a place to stand again. They packed her provisions in a satchel, the next day dried fruit, water, bread wrapped in cloth. Mariam borrowed a mule cart from a neighbor heading partway to Abilene and promised to send it back. When she left the farm, the children chased the cart for half a mile, waving with flour-covered hands. Miriam hugged her tightly at the gate and whispered, "Don't be afraid. A mother's love finds its way." The road was long. Mariam traveled across dusty trails and quiet towns, through prairies stretching wide beneath an open sky. Along the way, she worked where she could, cleaning, sewing, cooking at a roadside, and she earned enough for a room or two, some meals, and directions, and every night, she pulled out Caleb's letter and read it again. Each mile felt like both a burden and a gift. She carried not only her hopes but the knowledge that somewhere out there, a little girl was laughing, learning to walk, maybe even speaking her first words. And she had a name, Layla, at last. Near the end of October, she arrived at the ranch, just outside Abilene. The house was whitewashed and tidy, the porch lined with rocking chairs. Horses grazed in a nearby field. There were signs of life: baby shoes on the step, a small wagon tipped on its side, a quilt airing out on the line. She stood at the gate for a long moment, unsure of what she would say, unsure if she would even speak. She didn't come to take the child. She had no claim. She had only one desire: to see her, to know that Layla was safe, that she was loved. Before she could knock, the door opened. A woman stepped out. Late 30s, kind eyes, apron around her waist. She saw Mariam and paused, as if she had been expecting someone, not her, but someone like her. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the woman asked gently. Mariam opened her mouth. No words came. Then a voice from inside, bright and high, called, "Mama, I found my doll." Mariam's breath caught, and then she saw her. A little girl toddled out, holding a cloth doll, her dark curls bouncing, her smile lighting up the whole porch. Mariam took a step back, her hand to her chest. She looked just like her. The woman noticed her gaze, then glanced at the child. She stepped closer and said softly, "Are you her?" Mariam nodded, unable to speak. The woman gave a long, slow breath. "Caleb told us you might come one day." "I don't want to take her," Mariam managed. "I just wanted to see her. To know she was all right. To know ... she still had her name." "She does," the woman said. "We kept it. It's all she's ever known." Tears slipped down Mariam's cheeks. The woman paused. "Would you like to meet her?" Mariam hesitated, then nodded. The woman called gently, "Layla, come here, sweetheart." The little girl came forward, curious and brave. Mariam knelt down, slowly, letting the child see her eyes. Layla looked at her with innocent wonder. Then, without prompting, she held out the doll. Mariam reached for it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman said, "Would you like to stay for supper?" Mariam stood. "Only if it's not too much trouble." "It's not," she said. "You're part of her story. And ours now too." That evening, Mariam sat at a table with the family who loved her daughter. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. She had found Layla. She had given her up once, out of love. And now, out of love, she had been welcomed back.